members of the board. Appreciate you being with us this evening, and also thank you, Chief Westrop, that every time I learned something new from his presentations and all important information. So with that, Margarita is here, Director of Community Engagement. I'd like to just begin by thanking you all again for your service to the community and for the work that you're doing and you have been doing. And we appreciate you taking on the role of representing your neighborhood and our collective community and ensuring our city council members receive consistent and firsthand feedback from residents' perspectives. So as trusted leaders, it's likely that you've heard concerns from our local residents about the recent violence in our community. We believe this violence is tied to toxic stress that can be prevented, and we'll get to some of the root causes in a few slides. In fact, the City of Santa Rosa's staff and our partners in Violence Prevention Partnership have spent nearly 20 years organizing community members to offer programs and services to youth and families to help them thrive. And today we'd like to tell you a little bit about the past and some of our recent efforts. Then we'd like to invite you to share your insights as we begin to craft our new plans for meeting current and future needs. And by that, I mean, where are we in terms of during pandemic, how we respond, and post-pandemic. So hoping to hear more from you at that point. And if you're curious and like to learn more about what we're going to be sharing today, we will have the report available later this week on our website. We'll make sure to email it out to everyone so you could take a look. And now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Serena Leno to tell us about the Santa Rosa Violence Prevention Partnership's history. Serena?
Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you all. So my name is Serena Leno. I'm the Administrative Services Officer for the Community Development and Engagement Portfolio, which includes the Office of Community Engagement and the Violence Prevention Partnership. I been with the city for over 20 years, and 18 of those years were actually with the violence prevention efforts. So I have a long history with this group, and I'm excited to be able to come back and share a little bit about the history of how we came to be where we are today. So as you may recall, back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, our community was really experiencing a spike in violence, and particularly with youth and gang violence. And so right around 2002, we had a significant incident with Cinco de Mayo. Some of you may remember when folks flooded the streets, there was a lot of violence. And at that point, the city said, you know what, we really need to do something about this. And so at the time, then Mayor Sharon Wright pulled together a group of community leaders and local partners to brainstorm and think through how can we really come together as a community and determine what strategies we would need to do to help curtail any further violence. So that's why we wanted to emphasize the fact that this is citizen-led, because from the very beginning, it was community-led, community-driven. And I think that's really where the power is of the partnership and how we've been so effective over all these years. So as I mentioned, the City Council initiated this planning group. We held several listening sessions and planning sessions, and to really understand what was going on in the community, and then ultimately determine what those strategies would be and to address and actually do something meaningful in the community. So ultimately what was born was, at the time, the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force, now Violence Prevention Partnership. And I'll talk a little bit about that change in a future slide. But what really stood out was that if we were going to be effective, we needed a dedicated funding source in order to be successful. And that was where Measure O was born. And so we capitalized on all of the community interest and efforts towards making this difference. And we invited the community to help us design what we needed to fund. And so we were very fortunate. So in 2004, voters passed Measure O. It's a 20-year tax initiative, and by an overwhelming, I think 67%, I want to say, which is actually pretty substantial since this is a special tax. And that what that means is it's dedicated funding to it for a very specific purpose. Next slide, please. So here's a little bit of a timeline of what we've done in the nearly 20 years that we have been doing this. So as I mentioned, in 2002 was where the first initial conversations were happening. 2003 is when the Mayor's Game Prevention Task Force was actually formed. 2004 was when Measure O was passed. And then took us a couple of years to really get everything figured out, get things going. And in 2006 was when the Choice Grant Program was born. You'll hear a little bit more about the Choice Grant Program in just a bit, but that was really where we started to invest dollars in the community. 2008 was when the first strategic plan was developed, and that's where we took all of the collective interest and we got the ball rolling. And we've always said it's like building a bicycle while you're riding it, because at the time, gang prevention was still a very new concept. And so we were trying to figure it out. We were learning from partners across the state. We're members of the California Violence Prevention Network. And ultimately that all led to the creation of the strategic plan. So we had to educate ourselves and inform ourselves about what was really evidence-informed practices to make these strategic investments in the community. So then fast forward 2012 to 2016 was when we said, okay, we need to evolve. We need to further these efforts and we need to continue to grow. And then we said, you know what? The Mayor's Game Prevention Task Force served a purpose in the early days because it was truly a task force. It was like, get in, let's figure this out. And then we realized that it became a barrier. The name itself became a barrier and it wasn't as community friendly. And so we went through this extremely comprehensive process, again, citizen-led, community-driven, because that was really our core. And that's, again, how successful we have always been. And so we really wanted to embody that. And so we did this comprehensive community process and ultimately rebranded ourselves as the Violence Prevention Partnership. And at that time was when we took more of a public health approach to violence prevention, recognizing you can't just enforce your way out of the problem. It can't be suppression only. It needs to be this more holistic public health approach, recognizing that we need to address the root causes of violence. And so Magali touched on a little bit, and you'll hear a little bit more, but like we had to look at housing, we had to look at economic drivers, we had to look at not just crime and safety, but like the school conditions. What is going on that is potentially contributing towards the violence that is happening in the community? And so a year later was when we created the Community Safety Scorecard, which is really grounded in what is known as the root causes of violence and in that public health approach. And because the idea behind the scorecard is to develop metrics for us to measure the work that we are doing to see if whether or not the work that we're doing is having the impact that we are intending. So the scorecard helps us to identify several different indicators, and you'll hear a little bit more about that, but that really became the core foundation for how we measured our efforts moving forward. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about Measure O specifically. This is a hot topic for us because we're coming to the end. It's kind of shocking. I was there in the very beginning. And it's like, oh, we have 20 years. We got plenty of time. Well, that 20 years is right around the corner. And so we're at a point where we really need to focus in on what we're going to do moving forward. But just to understand what Measure O is now. So it's a public safety tax measure. And as I mentioned, passed by voters in 2004. It's a 1/4 cent sales tax. And so it generates an estimated $7 million a year in revenue, but that really does ebb and flow depending on how well the community is doing from a sales tax perspective. And 40% is allocated to police, 40% is allocated to fire, and then the remaining 20% is, did we lose our slides here?
My apologies, Serena. I was trying to launch a new PowerPoint as some of the images were skewed here. So if you can just one moment, I am so very sorry.
No worries, no worries. Anyways, as Moun's pulling that up, as I mentioned, so it's a public safety tax initiative. So it is split between police, fire, and violence prevention. And I think that, it recognizes that public safety as a whole really is not just about police and fire, but public safety also means investments in our community in a prevention sort of standpoint. I could just keep rambling. But I'll wait. Oh, here we go. Yay, saved by the bell. Okay. All right. So actually, if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay. So let's see here. Diving into the 20% a little bit more, I got to get myself back into the group here. So the 20% allocation, it estimates around $1.5 million a year, give or take. And it further breaks down into 35% towards choice grant program and 65% towards violence prevention efforts. And ultimately, when Measure O was created and first envisioned by the community back in, 2002, 2003, it really needed this oversight body, so to speak, to really manage the overall funds. And that's really where one of the main roles of the Violence Prevention Partnership is to really look at the totality of this funding source and invest in a very strategic way throughout the community. And so the staff of the Violence Prevention Partnership, who are all here today, partner very closely with Recreation because they are our partners who also receive Measure O funding. And so we work together very collaboratively to invest these dollars. So the recreation programs are funded through the 65% side, along with the staffing of the staff for the Violence Prevention Partnership. And the 35% is dedicated funding that is per the ordinances. A minimum of 35% has to be spent towards providing funding for community-based organizations and school-related programs. And my dog. The 35% does ebb and flow over the years, and it allows us some flexibility to be able to invest a little bit more dollars towards some of the, if a need happens to be higher that particular year. So for example, this year we're currently funding around approximately, I think 50% of the Measure O revenue is actually going towards the grant program. So, but the grant program is really meant to provide additional types of services that Recreation doesn't provide. So they specialize in after school and neighborhood-based programs, and you'll hear more from them. But the grant program really is meant to look at the totality of the spectrum and see what we're missing. So it could provide mental health related services. It could provide, we have a Boys and Girls Club inside Juvenile Hall. So it really looks at where is the highest need, and then we can invest those dollars where that need is. Okay, I think that's it for me. And so I think I'm turning it back over to you, Magali.
Thank you, Serena. So on this slide, we really just want to focus in on the toxic stress, as well as other factors that can lead to eruptions and violence in our community that we've unfortunately seen recently in our neighborhoods. And as a matter of fact, our violence prevention operations team today was participating in a trauma-informed care workshop led by Hannah Institute, where we talked about not only ACEs, but a new a world that I learned about was positive child experiences, right? And what is it that we need to counteract some of these, the ACEs and the effects of ACEs and the trauma. So as you all know, Santa Rosa residents have experienced several overlapping crises that contribute to the toxic stress. The fires alone have created trauma for youth all the way to elders in the community. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows, young people who have very strong reactions, when they hear sirens, when they hear or they smell smoke, and adults as well. So with the pandemic impacted employment, schools, childcare, and housing, in addition to creating isolation and causing some residents to lose some of the services. So the pandemic really revealed, and what we've heard everywhere is that it revealed more needs in the community than we'd ever heard about before. So our community has gone through some very difficult times, but fortunately, we are a strong community and we have dedicated leaders such as yourselves on the CAB here who've been working diligently to help heal our community in the many ways and the work that you all do. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our team, our city staff that's, let's see, our city staff. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so these are the folks from the Violence Prevention Partnership, many of which you will hear from this evening. I would like Madeline to just take a quick second to, pull back the curtain. What do you look like? Because you are our tech extraordinaire, and really just kind of a crucial piece. Can you say hi so your face, your bubble pops up?
Hi, everyone. This is Madeline Brown. I'm the senior admin for the Community Engagement Department. It's so nice for everyone from CAB to see me, as I have been working with you all for just over a year, but all virtually, and I'm usually just a black square. But I've been with the department for about 2 years, and I assist all the members of our department as far as our choice grant program, collaboration with other departments within the city, as well as outside organizations and community leaders to basically help develop and create new ways of community engagement and violence prevention programs in the community.
Thank you so much. So when you hear that magical voice, now you know what she looks like. So in addition to these wonderful folks, we also have 2 fantastic vistas, Maddie Cox and Haley Katz, and our intern who is amazing, Rihanna Bazul. So those are some of the folks that work with us. Next slide, please. Okay, so part of what has recently shifted in our community includes a greater acknowledgement for root problems like discrimination, a lack of equity in a lot of our systems, and poverty. So this idea that there are deep roots under our social problems is an idea that the partnership has been lifting up for the past 6 years or more. As we discussed earlier, people first describe violence in Santa Rosa as a gang problem that came from outside of our community. But upon deeper reflection, we learned that violence is rooted in social structures that exist in our communities. So violence often erupts when one or more of these root causes taken hold in our community. And if we look at the list here, we'll see things like, feeling like neighborhoods are unsafe, reentry is not supported, some of our folks that have been incarcerated or in the system, families experience unemployment and poverty, families have poor access to health and mental health care, prevention services are lacking, and violence is normalized. So many of these factors have a lot to do with proximity to resources and where people are situated. And that's something that the Violence Prevention Partnership really wants to work on. And our team being sort of one of those bridges between community resources, how are we linking together? How are we working together to link folks? So to talk more about some of those services, I'd like to introduce Juan Flores from our recreation staff, and he's going to tell you more about neighborhood services and our rec programs. Juan?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here. So neighborhood services, we're within the recreation department. The neighborhood services division provides targeted services to youth and residents who need them most at little to no cost. Recreation and academic support opportunities at the neighborhood level are really key to youth development and their well-being. So our mission is to provide youth with early prevention services. We do this by casting a large safety net in Santa Rosa through providing programs such as neighborhood after-school programs, evening sports programs, recreational camps. Anytime the youth are at a school, we're providing a camp, as well as family events. So we run these wide variety of programs, which allow us to reach thousands of youth and families in Santa Rosa. When in our programs, our staff, our coaches, mentors build positive relationships with the youth and families, creating a space of trust, which will further enable us and our team to identify and provide a continuum of services where needed. So we tailor our approach to each youth based off of their needs. We often see youth grow within our programs from a young participant all the way up to high school as a volunteer, and at times, even as a staff member coming on board to further, help the community. In some circumstances, our programs may not be what is best suited for the youth or their family at that moment. And this is where the partnership between neighborhood services, the violence prevention partnership is really vital. So our ability to refer youth to the community partners allows for the continuum of services which best suit that family. So that is where it's key for neighborhood services and the violence prevention partnership to really work together. So our safety net is really bringing all the youth into the programs. And from there, some may just need programs within neighborhood services, but we have the opportunity to refer them for additional services. Thank you.
All right. The remainder of the Measure O funds are dispersed through the Choice Grant Program. Choice stands for Community Helping Our Indispensable Children Excel. The grant review team makes the funding recommendations. This team is representative of multiple perspectives with a vested interest in working toward our mission. Members include community partners such as local schools, law enforcement, probation, recreation, CAB members, and city council members. In 2016, the Violence Prevention Partnership created a community scorecard that identified key neighborhood services and key service areas where Measure O might be invested to help improve the life of youth and families. Madeline, can you go to the next slide, please? The partnership then engaged in a strategic planning process to help determine the root causes of violence. Factors that influence a community's health goes beyond crime statistics. The factors include housing, financial security, community safety, employment, education, and environment. The partnership has deepened its knowledge of the complex needs of our youth, families, and communities. The Community Safety Scorecard and the strategic plan work together to address Santa Rosa's unique social determinants of health. The Choice Grant Program provides critical services that contribute to strengthening youth and families, as well as building safer Santa Rosa communities. Focus groups with community members and partners were engaged in prioritizing 10 strategies. 4 of the 10 strategies, which are also our pillars, were prioritized and incorporated into the 2017 to 2022 strategic plan. We have made strategic investments of Measure O Choice funds in these 4 areas: school readiness, student engagement and truancy prevention, street outreach and mediation, and workforce development. Next slide, please. Over the past year, partnership staff have been working with our funded choice partners to adopt the results-based accountability framework. The framework links the results we seek for our vision with strategies, the 4 pillars, to our programs and their performance. You will see that results-based accountability, the framework is exciting, strategic, and a simple way to track our efforts. We hope you will read through our report and see how the programs have been putting your tax dollars to work. As one example, one of our workforce development agencies is tracking these performance measures. How much? The number of youth served during a choice grant cycle. How well? The percentage of youth reporting positive interactions with agency staff. Better off? The percentage of youth that report positive interactions with agency staff. Managing these grant funds is just one of the activities of our staff. We will also partner with community-based organizations and local residents like you to keep these efforts moving forward. I'll turn it over to Danielle, who will talk about our focus on engagement and listening to our community.
Thanks, Geraldine. So as was mentioned throughout this presentation this evening, the Violence Prevention Partnership has a history of involving community in its work. Oh, sorry, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. As the partnership has evolved over the years, so is the approach the city has taken with community engagement. In 2016, the Violence Prevention Partnership was merged with community engagement programs to become the Office of Community Engagement. So in order to ensure our organization is reaching as many residents as possible, using an authentic community engagement strategies, we needed to find a model of community engagement to work from. And I believe most of you are familiar with this spectrum of community engagement. So we chose to work from the spectrum of community engagement developed by International Association of Public Participation and updated by Rosa Gonzalez of Facilitating Power, by taking a variety of approaches to reach and connect with as many community members as possible. So the partnership currently is taking a significant pivot, going back to our roots, moving from informing and consulting with the community, which is kind of what we've been doing for a little bit over the past few years, to deferring to the community so that you can have more ownership in the solutions being implemented to address community violence. We have started this new approach with community listening sessions, which we held last year and hope to continue to hold as the pandemic allows us, and are including community members in the revisioning of the partnership and its strategies. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Irma, who will lead you in a brief activity before we wrap up the presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Irma, the new wraparound coordinator for the Violence Prevention Partnership. Thank you so much for being here. I came to the partnership with at least a decade of outreach and community engagement strategizing. And I chose to work with the partnership because they really do put community at the core. And part of what we want to do by putting the community at the core is we want to hear back from you. So keeping the roots of violence in our mind, where do you believe the Violence Prevention Partnership needs to invest more to support health and safety of the Santa Rosa families today? And in order for us to kind of gauge that and see where we can reinvest our resources, we have designed a quick survey, a very short survey, and Madeline has put that in the chat box. So we're going to give you the opportunity to give us some feedback. And this survey is based on the 4 pillars of the Violence Prevention Partnership. So we are going to give you about 3 minutes. And thank you. So it's 4 questions, and again, based on the 4 pillars of the Violence Prevention Partnership. And we want you to rate how important that particular pillar is to you. So I'm going to go ahead and set a timer. And we're going to give you about 3 minutes. And if you are having a hard time opening up the link, please raise your hand and Madeline or our staff will provide some answers for you, help you out with that. And also, if 3 minutes is not enough time for you to fill out the survey, we will also have this posted on our website. All right, folks, we have about 1.5 minutes left to finish this quick little survey. And thank you so much in advance for your time and your input. All right, well, this 3 minutes have gone by fast. Usually like a minute on Zoom seems like an eternity. So you have 7 seconds left. Again, if you didn't have a chance to finish the survey, please check out our website. It'll be posted on there. All right, that's time. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Gustavo. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Irma. Thank you all for making the time to be with us here tonight. We want to take this time to recruit you as our outreach specialist and tell you guys about the open house series that we're going to be hosting. So there will be 2 events that we're going to have for our monolingual Spanish-speaking community. One on September 1st at 5 p.m. and the other will be on September 23rd at 5:30. We will be hosting a English open house on September 8th. So we want to invite the CAB to help us spread the word of these open houses. They will be through Zoom, similar to what we are doing here tonight. And what we will be doing is giving this presentation and really hope to get feedback from members of the community on the vision, that sharing our vision for the partnership and being able to hear some of their input on what they feel or what efforts they would like to see in the community to reduce violence. Next slide, please. And at this time, I would like to open it up for questions. So I know I'm pretty sure that some of you may have some questions for us.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was chock full of information. And at this time, as we get back to where we can see all of the members, there we go. It's great to see everybody's faces and be able to facilitate questions from the CAB board members. If there's any questions, please raise your hand or wave at me and let me know. I'm not seeing any questions at this time.
So we did a really good job then with the PowerPoint. It answered everybody's question.
It was synchronized, it was coordinated, it was collaborative. It was wonderful. So I really appreciate the history tour of and that information, as well as the new approach that we've seen in action over this past year, and giving us that information. My question would be, and of course, board member Ram, I see you have your hand up. I'm going to let you go first.
Well, that was kind of a whoops, but I will ask a question then. So if this thing ends in 2024, is there a plan to continue, put it back on the ballot? Is it, because just looking at the 20-40-40 split of how you broke the percentages down, essentially it's 490,000 for the grants and 910,000 for the balance of it. I would imagine costs, and that's based on the $7 million you were saying. Is that what happens in 2025?
Magali, would you like to take this question?
Sure, and thank you for asking that question. So yeah, the split is 40% police, 40% fire, and then 20% is split between us and neighborhood services. And so I think one of the efforts will be from the council to put it out to community, to do some polling and to figure out, like, you know, this was established 20 plus years ago. You know, we're definitely in a new landscape. Many things have changed. You know, we're just in a totally different space and mind frame. So I think we're gonna do the polling to figure out, like, what is community looking for today? We want to gather information of, like, as we finish out this iteration of Measure O funding, what do you all want to see as we continue forward till, you know, the end of 2024? But I know that it'll be coming up that we will go out to community and ask community, you know, do you still want these percentages to stay the same? You know, how are people feeling in terms of, like, you know, getting taxed? At what percentage are people also willing to get taxed? If you are talking about, like, you know, fire mitigation efforts, right? I mean, no one is going to say no to that, right?
Right. Right.
very necessary. So that's a great question. And I know the council will be providing further direction. Serena, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Actually, just really quick, there was a council study session last week on this, on Measure O. So I
So
would
I was
really
gonna say,
encourage-
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would encourage everyone to go and check that presentation out, because police, fire, and community engagement neighborhood services provided what that would look like if Measure O is no longer with us and that funding went away. It was a very eye-opening presentation.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I would,
Danielle.
yeah, I would, I'm echoing that. And I know that the council has, they're putting it towards the long-term finance committee and a subcommittee specifically to talk about this a little bit more, because there is an interest in going back to the voters in 2022, which is just a real quick year away. And
Right.
there's a lot to be done in that time frame, including, like what Magali was saying, around the polling and some sort of community process. We still haven't determined what that's going to be quite yet, but there will be an extensive community process. It needs to be, frankly. So as Danielle mentioned, I'd encourage you to look at the study session from last week, because it was quite informative. We only talked about the 20% slice of the pie, but the impacts of police and fire will be detrimental as well. So all the more reason to have CAB support us and and help us moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Are there any other questions from the CAB members? So just a clarity, we're talking about the vote in 2022 potentially. So that would be June 2022. That is a fast timeline.
I think November, maybe. I think,
Oh, okay.
Magali, I think if they're looking at November.
Yeah, I think we are looking at November 2022. We do need some time to give ourselves the opportunity to educate community around, as Serena was saying, I completely forgot that I actually presented, last week on everything that would go away pretty much if Measure O was not in existence. But also with the opportunity of now we have In Response, which, Captain Cregan from our police department has talked a lot about, which is our version of Cahoots, right? I think communities reacted very well to that. And does community want more models like that? I think that's important information to capture.
Definitely. So my question is around those 10 grants that are being given out. And I remember getting a violence prevention partnership presentation a little bit over a year ago, I believe. And some of those programs were named. And I just think that that's really important that, our newer members maybe hear some of those organizations that are being funded by those grants. Can we maybe get like the top 3 or 4 because they do amazing work in the community?
I got you. So I actually I have all of my reports all around me. And so this report we'll be putting out on our website by the end of this week. But we are working with SAY, so Social Advocates for Youth. They do work with us on workforce development, Conservation Corps North Bay. So when Chief Westrop was talking about generating this interest in young people, there are agencies, there are nonprofits who want to introduce young people to the trades. One program that we absolutely love to work with, we love to work with all of them, but the Boys and Girls Club has the REACH program, which is working with juvenile hall youth. And they did a really incredible thing recently where they sort of cross collaborated. So there were some youth that worked with a couple of other agencies that built full functioning ADA bathrooms and showers for the homeless. And so these young people got exposure to, the trades, how to use tools, like all of this really great, wonderful stuff. And through the RBA model that Geraldine was talking about, which is results-based accountability, we're trying to figure out how much should we do with the programs that we're working with, and are we better off? And specifically with this program, of 150 youth that participated in the club or the REACH program, 99% avoided incarceration while enrolled, which is really fantastic and really great, and speaks to the work that their program is doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful news. And I loved seeing those photos of all the children in the PowerPoint presentation. That's what it really drives the point home, that that's who we're touching, along with the families, along with, the older teens. And I see Irma here putting some of the other organizations there, Land Paths, LifeWorks, SAY, CCNB, which you mentioned, and the 4 Cs, as well as the Boys and Girls Club with that REACH program. So I know that there's others as well, but thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for all of the work that this small and mighty team does. The ripple effects are enormous out in the community. So, just cheers for all of you, for all of the work that you do, and for the differences that you make. And with that, we're going to take it to public comment. Are there any public comments or hands raised?
There are no hands raised for public comment.
All right. Well, thank you once again for the presentation. Without any further questions, I'm just looking just in case there's a late hand up for a comment or a question. It doesn't look like there is. So thank you all for joining us tonight and for making that presentation. I look forward to promoting your upcoming events in September.